Happy Wednesday. It is July 12th. Oh, get settled in here. All right. Good morning. So today's topic, we're going to talk about listings. We've always been a listing based company, very listing focused. So our focus is going to continue to be on listings. Now, as you go after and talk to more sellers and more possibilities and potentials, you're going to be signing listing agreements. You're going to be walking through those processes. So I know we cover the purchase and sale contract a lot, but we don't focus on the listing agreement a whole lot. So I'm going to walk through the listing agreement, talk about how to explain the different parts of it in a very easy, brief fashion so that you don't get too far into the weeds and get overwhelmed with it. We'll talk about some of the other listing agreements that go along with it, like a one-party listing agreement in certain circumstances. We'll talk about the rental listing agreement if there's time, and then just some of the potential objections along with the listing agreement. So if you've had any objections from sellers for any part of the listing agreement as you're going through it or getting them to sign one, please chat them in and let me know. We'll make sure that we address them and give you some different ways to overcome. All right, so that's going to be the topic of the day today. I wanted to start off with a video, though, and it's a very short video. And let's see. All right. Very short video. But this video is, just pay attention and watch. This is how strong habits are. That's what I want you to focus on. This is how strong habits are. Did you catch it? Did you see it? She never put a bridle on the horse. She just walked up to the horse, pretended like she put one on. And because the horse is so entrained, so into and so focused unconsciously in the habit of, she comes around, stands like this, puts this over my head, starts to walk out. She's holding the lead and usually turns back around because I don't always come first right away. And then I start walking. The horse did it without any bridle, lead, or anything on its head. It's a habit. Now I'd ask you, how many of the things that you do are habits? Now, is that something that if that was a free horse and that was a habit that the horse had learned, is that something that would serve that horse? No. Is that something that serves that horse now? No, but it helps the horse to know that, okay, when we do that, we're going for a walk. We're going to go here. We're going to go there. And unconsciously, I can forget about everything else and I'll just follow the lead of this person. How many other things do you have that you are doing on a daily basis or that impact your business, impact your life, that are habits that you don't even realize? Like when you get home, do you immediately go and grab a glass of wine? When you go somewhere, do you automatically order a Coke because that's just what you've always done? When you go to the office and you start to plan for your prospecting, do you find all these other reasons, or do you have certain little habits that you're doing that start to pull you off track instead of pushing you towards doing the thing that you want? It is so easy to form a habit, especially when the things that you're doing make you comfortable. And especially when the thing that you want to do is uncomfortable. You always lean into those comfortable things and you can easily start to form a habit of comfort and avoidance of the thing that's going to make you uncomfortable. So just keep that in mind. I just thought that was a really, really cool video. So let's jump into our topic for the day. We'll get rid of that. All right. A couple points before we get started on the actual listing agreement. Couple points. The listing agreement is between the brokerage and the seller. Not the agent, the brokerage and the seller. You have an agreement, an independent contractor agreement with the brokerage. The brokerage has an agreement with the seller. The brokerage represents the seller. you, the agent, are facilitating that relationship and representation for the brokerage. So it's like, I know we say it's just habitual. It's, my listing, so it's the brokerage listing. So just understand that, knowing that the brokerage is the one that's reliable, responsible for all of the terms of the listing agreement. And we entrust in you, the agent, which is why we hired you and why we do constant training to keep you and your knowledge up here and representing the brokerage while we represent this seller. And every opportunity that you bring to the brokerage for the brokerage to represent the seller is going to benefit both the brokerage, the brokerage, the seller, and you, the agent. We all stand to benefit from that. So just remember that it's an agreement is between the brokerage and the seller. Now, I just want to clarify that the purchase contract is between buyer and seller. Really simple, really stupid. Buyer and seller purchase contract, brokerage and seller listing agreement. Why I'm mentioning this is because what happens and what comes up all the time is, as you're doing a deal and you're talking with a seller, or you're either a listing agent, buyer's agent, you guys are starting to negotiate, and something comes up and all of a sudden commission becomes a talk, and we want to put commission terms in the purchase and sale agreement. If the brokerage is the one who has the agreement with the seller and the broker agreed to commission terms. So how can a buyer and a seller in a completely separate contract and purchase agreement, how can the buyer and the seller agree to change unilaterally without the broker's consent the terms of the listing agreement? They can't, which is why we don't put those types of commission terms into a purchase and sale agreement. Listing agreement between brokerage and seller. We agree to terms, we agree to timeframes, we agree to commissions. I'm going to perform these services. You're going to pay me X dollars. Buyer and seller get into negotiations and determine, seller goes, or listing agent and agents go, agents, because the agent doesn't represent the seller, the brokerage does. The agent says, I'll give up some of the commission, or we'll negotiate the commission for this. We'll just reduce this and do that. Well, the brokerage technically is the one who has to agree. And a title company won't do credits on the HUD from brokerages without the brokerage's consent, because they understand this, which is why they ask for those things. So just a point of discrepancies that we have sometimes. So the MLS is an agreement between brokerages. So there's 3 separate agreements that happen: brokerage, seller, listing agreement, buyer, seller, purchase agreement. MLS has its own agreement that when we become members of the MLS, we enter into a contract with them as a brokerage, stating that there are terms that we will follow and ethics and rules that we will follow. And if we do this, we must do this. And if we put a property in, we must offer this commission. So in the MLS, if we don't have anything in writing from the other broker, because we offer a co-broke compensation to another broker, not the buyer's agent, to a broker who brings us a seller. The buyer's agent works on behalf of the broker, but we offer it to another brokerage. So a buyer's agent, again, cannot technically agree to change the terms of offering between brokerages in the MLS. I know these are particulars, and I know typically it's never an issue and everything goes smoothly, but if it ever came down to a finer point of contention where somebody's saying, well, a brokerage says, I never agreed to that. My agent may have put there, but my agent doesn't have the authority to do that. I want this because that's what's offered to me. They would have the right to do that, which is why, again, we always go back to having the brokerage send a letter agreeing to forego the offer of MLS compensation in lieu of X, whatever the new compensation is going to be, something along those lines. So Not meaning to start off with these particulars, but I think it's very important that we understand the differences between agreements. The listing agreement, the purchase and sale agreement, the agreement between brokerages and the MLS. Very important that we understand those, because that's why a lot of the conversations we'll have about commissions and those negotiations come up. And sometimes I understand you as the buyer's agent or listing agent are upset because you brokered a deal or you negotiated a deal. Technically, you don't necessarily have the full authority to do that because the brokerage is the one who has to agree to do that. But that's why these conversations do happen, because we just want to make sure we do it the right way. Again, listing agent between brokerage and seller, not agent and seller. And the listing agreement we're going to go through is a standard Florida Association of Realtors listing agreement. It is a standard agreement. The terms and verbiage and everything are all the same as the standard agreement, with minor changes where you are allowed to change the blanks and add certain verbiage instead of other verbiage. But everything is standard. All of the agreements, all of the consents, everything is a standard Florida Association of Realtors listing agreement. So we had an issue where a seller was upset because I wish I would have had my attorney look over this, because the terms that you put in here are not standard. They are not typical. They are not this. They are not that. This agreement only benefits you. It is not something that any agent should be using. And when he forwarded that to his attorney, as an attorney forwarded something over to me, I just simply replied, sir, I'm sure you'll see and understand that we use a standard Florida Association of Realtors listing agreement with simple fill in the blanks, and then those certain terms that are allowed to be changed. So nothing has been done unethically, out of order. Everything is in line with the Florida Association of Realtors and their code of ethics. And it was a very short conversation because the attorney reviewed everything and just replied and said, great, where do I send the cancellation to? So it's a standard Florida Association of Realtors listing agreement. What if the owner offers the buyer XXX to make repairs? That's, again, though, if the owner is offering money to make repairs, that's between the buyer and the seller. Buyer and seller. He's offering money to make repairs based on the purchase agreement. I will buy your house for X. That's the purchase agreement. It has nothing to do with the listing agreement. Our listing agreement is between us and the seller, stating what we will do and what the seller will do whenever we go on market, which is what we're going to jump into now. So this is, again, a standard Florida Association of Realtors listing agreement. I'm going to try to go through this and not get too far into the weeds with certain explanations, so I can kind of give you an idea of how I would explain it. Well, why don't I try and do that now? This is how long it would take me to explain this to a seller. This is what I would do if I was explaining this to a seller. Mr. Seller, like I'll give them the option. We have the standard listing agreement. Did you have an opportunity to review it in the package that I had emailed over to you? Because this is in your preview package, your pre-listing package. This is in all the documents they'll sign. Did you have a Yes, I did. Would you like me to go through some of the particulars that stand out, or do you feel comfortable and confident moving forward with the terms? I feel comfortable and confident moving forward with terms. Great. I'm not going to create any problems. We're going to go to the blanks and fill them in and express those. But no, would you mind explaining a few of those points to me? Wonderful. Here's how I would explain it, and I can go through it. It'll probably take less than 3 minutes. So let's go ahead and start off. It's 8:45. Mr. Seller, this is an agreement between you and Century 21 Beggins Enterprises. You authorize us to sell the property starting on this date and ending on this date. We'll be selling this property with these appliances and personal property included, which we've already discussed. This is not occupied by a tenant. Obviously, you live here, and these are the price that we will be offering the property to the other buyers at with these terms. We won't be offering any of the terms in here quite at this time because we don't feel it's necessary with the way that everything is rolling. We are obligated to make diligent effort to sell this property, and we will be putting it into the MLS to do so. You authorize us to market the property in most any way that we deem fit. Let me tell you that if you want to sell your property, please do not check either of these boxes. And let me tell you why. One says don't put it on the internet. The other one says don't put the address on the internet. If people can't find your property, especially on the internet, because 99% of the people are starting on the internet, they won't be able to see it, and you're going to greatly inhibit my ability to sell the property. You also authorize us to put a lockbox on the property and hold us harmless for stupid agent tricks, things that other people could do, but it is a very protective lockbox. I'll walk through a demonstration with you. We will also withhold verbal offers because verbal offers are as good as the piece of paper they are written on. We will be a single agent, which I'll explain very shortly. We do not authorize virtual offices to put comments and everything onto your listing online because we don't want them putting anything that could be degrading on there. Your obligations, just cooperate with us in any way possible. Understand that I have certain rules I have to abide by in the MLS. So when you ask me to do something, I have to make sure that there's not another rule that conflicts. Just tell me if you do anything to the property, with the mortgage or anything like that, and hold me harmless for things that I cannot control. And there's going to be some other things. If you are a foreign investor, you have to abide by, and you have to make all legally known things disclosed to the buyer. The purchase and sale contract will also say that same thing. Here's the professional fees and commissions that we will be collecting. If you had questions about those, I'd be happy to answer them. And then also when our fees are due. This is one of the most important parts, which we discussed in part of our presentation. Numbers 2, 3, 4, and 5 are what we offer you for single agency. I am loyal to you. I will keep your confidential information confident, and I will obey and fully disclose everything that happens during this contract. Those are some of the things that stood out to you, which is why you hired me. But if somebody in my office does decide that they're interested in this property, then you authorize us to consent to transition to a transaction broker. It is a seamless transition. You will not notice the difference. It really just turns me into making sure that everybody plays nice in the sandbox. You get the sale, the buyer gets the property, and everybody walks away and says, I'm so glad Century 21 Beggins was involved in this transaction. There's a termination fee if you decide to terminate this contract before the end of the agreement. Look, if life instances happen to you, let me know. My broker is not in the business, has been in this business for over 30 some years. We haven't stayed in the business for that long by making people pay when they can't sell their house because of a life event. So please just talk to me and we'll communicate. Everything will be just fine. We also agreed to these dispute resolutions, and that is it. So time. So from 8:45, somewhere in the middle, 8:45 and 30 seconds to 8:48, it just turned. That's typically how I go through the listing agreement. And sometimes I skip over other parts rather than others. So that's just, if somebody doesn't understand and wants to understand, if I know that this person is a C personality, needs to understand, has questions, wants this, I'm going to walk through that. Somebody who's a D personality, they've got this in front of them. They don't need me to walk through it. They probably say, I can read, I got it. I'm not going to have to go through all these things with them. So understanding the personality and the person on the other side, that's how I would go through it. So let's go back and start from the beginning. The agreement, like I said, is between the brokerage and the seller. You are authorizing us to sell the property. Now, this right out of the gates, this just happened to us, and we almost lost a buyer and a sale, even though we had a signed listing agreement. And let me explain why with the date of when it needs to start. So you authorize us to sell the property. You give us the authority to sell the property, the exclusive right to sell, meaning that if this property changes hands for any reasons, we are due compensation, whether you bring the buyer, whether the seller brings the buyer, whether I bring the buyer, whether other things happen and this transfers over, you sell it to your kids. Doesn't matter. If you sell it to your kids while it's listed, we are still due compensation. So what happens is there's a date that the agreement starts on. And when I say the date the agreement starts on is this is when the terms of the listing agreement will start, is this date. I'm telling you right now, make the listing agreement start the day they are signing it. If he's signing it today, but not going on market till next Friday, a week and 2 days from now, sign it today, make it start today, and use the Stellar MLS owner's authorization to withhold from MLS. That's how I want you to handle it. And here's why. We have a listing opportunity that came up. We signed the listing agreement on Friday. This just happened. Friday last week, signed it. Dated it for Monday. So the seller dated the listing agreement when he signed it as Friday, like where his signature line is. But this line right here, line 6, beginning on, said Monday. This guy was a for sale by owner. And over the weekend, we did not have the authority to sell the property and earn compensation. On Monday, luckily on Monday, somebody went by the property, saw the for sale by owner sign on the ground, went up to the door, knocked on the door and said, "Hey, is your home still for sale?" He said, "Yes." He walked her through the property, and luckily the seller is a unique man, and the customer didn't feel comfortable working with him. And he says, "Well, I just listed it, so I've got an agent that's involved, but we don't need to use them. If you come directly to me, I'll make sure this happens. We'll get it sold." This was on Monday. She wasn't comfortable with him because of the way he acted. So she came over to the office and said, "Hey, I heard that you guys are listing this property or have it listed. I need to talk to the agent. I really want to go through the agent because what advice, all the other stuff." If she would have went by there Sunday and this seller wasn't a unique person who kind of scared her off a little bit, and they contracted on Sunday, we are not due commission. I don't care that he signed it Friday. The terms of the agreement did not start till Monday, so we are not due a commission. Everybody follow? Any questions there? So whenever you're signing a listing agreement, the day he signs it is the day the terms start, because you're going to come into the office and you'll be talking to somebody and you might find somebody who has a buyer. We've had this happen too. And we have somebody, a buyer looking for property who needs to sell their home. They find a property, but they get a call from a buyer who is looking at another home in that neighborhood where our client lives. And he hadn't listed his home yet. But because we had all the terms lined up, we were able to say, "Well, I've got this other property and we've already got the listing agreement." So we were able to work a deal with them. Also, the seller's neighbor, the seller's friend, the seller's family, somebody may want to buy that home. And if they buy it before the terms of that listing agreement start on that date, we're not due compensation. I'm not saying we have to force them and hold them to it and say, "Yeah, I don't care that your neighbor bought it. You're paying me the full 6%. You just have the right to say that. You have the ability now to say, "Look, I am due the full 6% compensation because of the contract and legally binding agreement that we signed. But I understand I'm not going to have to do any of the marketing. I'm not going to have to make any of the phone calls. I'm not going to have to spend money on the photographs. I'm not going to some of those other things. So I'd be willing to reduce the fee to 5% to give you a little bit of a break, or whatever you guys agree to." So just keep those things in mind. The date should be, in my opinion, should always be the day that he signs this agreement, so that if it sells between now and the time he goes on the market, you're already locked into representing them. You are already due compensation, and it's up to you to determine how you would like to handle that. So we also agree that this doesn't automatically guarantee a sale. And this is going to be offered to all these people. So here's the address and legal description. Make sure we get the correct one. Personal property, including appliances. This is where I also mention, as we're filling the listing agreement out, this is where we get everything out of the way. Now, during the preview, during our conversations, I noticed that you had these beautiful curtains and you had that water softener, and you have all that pool equipment in the back, and you have the additional refrigerator in the garage along with the deep freezer. And then you also have that wine refrigerator in your kitchen or out on your patio. Fully understanding what appliances we're going to be offering. We're going to be offering the refrigerator, the range, the dishwasher, and the microwave, correct? Yes. What about the wine refrigerator on the back patio? No, I want to keep that. What about the deep freezer in the garage? I'm not giving them that. What about the refrigerator in the garage? It's a cheap fridge. It's only worth like $25. Why would they want that? I'm keeping it. Doesn't matter why they would or wouldn't. The contract has all of those included. Refrigerator, parentheses S. So this is where I talk about that. Contract also includes the Ring doorbell. The contract also includes those curtains. So I just want to make sure that you understand, if we wanted to get any of those things removed now and replaced with something that you will convey, let's go ahead and do that. Or we have to make sure that when the contract comes that we start talking about that. So this is where we're going to talk about the personal property. Make sure we list all of those. Are you including the water softener, the reverse osmosis? Are you including all of those things? And this is where I will list them. It is not currently occupied by a tenant, or it is. This is not that it's occupied. It is occupied by a tenant and has a lease. So this is where we'll put that. Price, obviously, terms, cash, conventional. Look, unless we have absolute 100% clarity that there is an issue with the home that will omit it from going VA or FHA because of safety and conditions, and we already know it's going to be a huge issue, just offer it for all of them. If you have a $700,000 property, would you accept an FHA offer? FHA loan limits like 475 or something like that, or for something. But if a buyer has $300,000 to put down, but the only way he can get the loan is by getting an FHA loan because of other circumstances, would you sell it to him? Yes. So why would we, just because of the price point, take out FHA or VA? We shouldn't, unless we know there is something that physically, safety issues, something that will omit it from going that way. I would not omit any of those. Every buyer is somebody, because I've looked at properties online for buyers and I see, they don't have FHA or VA. Whether I know it's an issue or not, I'm sitting there going, why would they not do that? What do they know about the property? What do they think? What are they disclosing? They're not disclosing anything. So why wouldn't they offer that? That doesn't make any sense. And so it creates more kind of issues. So to make sure we're offering everything. Seller financing, we're not really using this a whole lot, but if the seller wanted to do seller financing, we could. This might become more of a factor over the next 6 months to a year, is assumption of the existing mortgage. These are the terms we would be putting in if the seller was saying, yes, I have an assumable mortgage, a VA assumable mortgage, an FHA assumable mortgage. I would offer it to them. This is my balance. This is what needs to be paid off. This is the price that I want. So this is the assumption fee that I'm going to need. So is required, is not required. We'll have all of that. Seller expenses. If you are in an area where you have to offer seller credits, you can put them in right there as a percentage. You can also cross through and put a dollar amount if you wanted to, but this is basically, hey, I'm competing against new builds. Mr. Seller, I'm telling you that your $400,000 price will be a good price, but only if you're offering 2 or 3% of the purchase price towards the buyer's closing costs, because you're competing with the builder. There is no other resales in here. You're the only one. So that might help you stand out a little bit. But why would a buyer choose your property when they have available new constructions where they're going to get $15,000 in closing cost credit and have a brand new home nobody else lived in, and they can move in it in the same time frame of yours? So this is where we would put that in there. But the main point of this is between the broker and the seller is telling us, and we are telling the seller, if you listed at this and offer this percentage, and we bring you a buyer ready, willing, and able to offer this offer here, and you tell us you're not going to sell because you never agreed to give those closing costs and you don't want to, we have our legally binding listing agreement contract that says you said something different and told us this is how you would offer it. So multiple different things that you would want to address there, but that's the one. If you wanted to give any discount points credits, closing cost credits, and you wanted to have it in the listing agreement that the seller agreed to do it, and we discussed this and how we're going to start it off, this is where we want the seller obligated to a purchase price and those closing costs if it comes up, and we want to hold their feet to the fire. Our obligations are to make diligent effort to sell the property. And we will do that by putting it in the MLS. And this clarifies a little bit of the clear cooperation policy. It just says that, hey, we're going to put it into the MLS. We participate with the MLS, and you acknowledge that it is the best option for you to go into the MLS. And the minute that we do any public marketing, it must go into the MLS within 1 day. Must go in within 1 day of any public marketing. It's going to be published into the MLS. You direct us to put it into the MLS and divulge the listing price and all of the other information and share it with other brokers. My authority to market the property, public marketing includes all of these things. I've got flyers, I've got signs, I've got different sharing networks, and you basically authorize us carte blanche to do what we need to do to sell it. It also includes marketing the property to real estate agents outside of my office. We're going to put a sign in the property. We can use your name, use a seller's name in connection with the property. But again, here, if I typically always say this to them: if you want to sell your property and have the best opportunity to, please don't check either of these boxes. display the property on the internet except street address. So basically your PIN is not going to fall down where the address is. So no one's going to be able to say, I want to be in this neighborhood, and they're looking in this neighborhood, and your property PIN will not be on the address because we're not giving them the address. We're not going to show them where the property is. It's going to be online, but we're not going to tell them the property address. So they'll be able to see it, but they're not going to see the PIN. If somebody's searching for a specific neighborhood, it may not show up. We may miss that. Seller does not authorize broker to display property on MLS. Everything now is an IDX feed from the MLS. If we don't put it in the MLS, it won't go to Realtor, it won't go to Zillow, it won't go to Trulia, it won't go to all the other sites that are out there. It's an IDX feed. Everything pulls from the MLS. If we don't put it in MLS, it's not going to be on us. So basically you're telling me, don't show them the address and don't put it on the internet. You're kind of tying my hands. I understand there are specific circumstances that is warranted, but for the majority of us, almost every single time, if you want to sell your property, please don't check either of those boxes. Yeah, if you check that box, we're not putting a sign up. And if you check this, you're limiting my marketing. That's what it says. So you authorize me to get some information about the mortgage, and we'll give you a CMA, and we'll also be able to share that market analysis with prospective buyers. We will use a lockbox. It doesn't ensure security, but you should remove all your valuables. You should take everything out of the way. But this is for everyone's benefit, for your benefit, for my benefit, for the agent's benefit, and the buyer's benefit. We will withhold verbal offers because a verbal offer is as good as the paper it's written on. So if somebody tells me, and here's why I don't tell you about verbal offers, Mr. Seller, because when somebody comes to me and say, because I've had people ask, why don't you talk about verbal offers? Because the guy does this. Hey, I noticed your new listing for 465. Would your seller accept the full price offer? Yeah, kind of a stupid question. Would he accept it's on the market to sell? Yeah, give me a full price offer, get it in writing, we'll do it. Well, how about this? My buyer wants to offer full price, conventional loan. We're doing this, blah, 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 blah. Go ahead and talk to the seller and make sure they're okay with that, and then I'll put it in writing. I call the seller, Mr. Seller, would you take a full price 465 offer? I know that's what we're listed at. Here's the other terms. Great buyer. Everything looks good. I mean, everything's awesome. Oh yeah, I'll take it. Great. He goes, how do we get under contract? Well, I've got to get the contract, blah, blah, blah. Try to call the agent. No reply. Or I try to call the agent, talk to him. Oh, I can't get a hold of the buyer. I don't know what happened. Or next day, I don't know what happened to the buyer. Or the buyer's like, oh, buyer changed their mind. So now I've got a seller going, what the hell? What did you tell them that screwed that up? They seem so interested. I watched my Ring video doorbell where they came through the property. They seem so excited. What did you do to piss them off? Or he's just going, what happened? Where'd the offer go? You told me we had a full price offer. The offer's not here. And now the seller gets frustrated and he thinks we're doing something or not doing our job. So we withhold verbal offers. Put it in writing and I'll put it in front of him. Single agent for the seller. This is just this is noting when we get down to our single agent. This is a standard Florida Association of Realtors listing agreement, single agent listing agreement. Not every standard listing agreement has the single agent line. So some of them are a standard transaction broker where they're just a transaction broker, single agency removed along with the section below single agency. The virtual office websites. Now there's certain websites that they have, it's a brokerage, it's virtual, it's online. They allow comments and they allow automated valuation modules to automatically kind of dictate. This isn't Zillow. Zillow's not a brokerage. Well, they are, but their website isn't. So virtual office websites, we're saying, no, I don't authorize people to put comments onto my listing. I do not authorize people to do the automated valuations where they tell you what they think your property is worth. Mr. Seller, here are your obligations. You're going to cooperate with us in carrying out any of the terms of this agreement, including sending any buyer who comes to you immediately. Anybody interested in a property, you send them to me immediately. You authorize and know that I may be subject to rules from the MLS that I have to follow. There may be penalties that come from them. So if you tell me to do something that's going to create a penalty for me, we have to have a conversation. You're going to give me keys to the property and make it accessible to show during reasonable times. So that's something that you can always go to your seller and say, if you have a really difficult seller says, well, I'm just not going to show the property. I said, Mr. Seller, you did sign an agreement with us. And part of that agreement says that you're going to provide us the keys and make it available to show at reasonable times. What's reasonable? I don't know. It's not for us to decide. He'll have his idea. We'll have ours. And then the only one that really matters is an attorney or a judge if it ever gets to that point. But we can try to hold them to the fire and put that out for them. Inform me if you do any leasing, mortgaging, refinancing, or anything that might encumber this property or prohibit us from selling it. And you're going to hold me harmless. There's stupid people doing stupid things. I can't be held responsible for them. There's going to be, if you do something negligent and don't tell me something, and then it creates a problem, you're going to hold me harmless for that. Because if you don't tell me, I can't protect you. We're going to use a lockbox, and I can't be responsible for what other people do with the lockbox. The existence of undisclosed material facts or a court arbitration decision that a broker was not compensated in connection with the transaction is entitled to compensation. You're going to hold me harmless for all of these things. This brings up FIRPTA. This is the first time where you can discuss with them. If you are a foreign investor, there are some regulations for something called the Foreign Investment Real Property Tax Act, where the only way that the government gets their money is by withholding money from your proceeds, a 15% withholding from the total purchase price. They will withhold that, and then it's up to you to prove to them that you don't owe it. So if you are a foreign investor, please let me know and I'll get you in contact with the right people so that we can answer the right questions. You agree right now to make all disclosures that are required. Anything that you know that materially affects the value of this property that's not readily observable to me, to you, to a buyer, to anybody else outside, you will disclose that to them. You will do that by using what we call a seller's property disclosure. This is our CYA form. This basically says, we know that you have to do this. I'm going to give you this form and ask you to do it. That way you can't tell me or say to somebody else that you didn't know that it was an obligation. We did everything we could to make sure that you disclosed all of those things. All right. The purchase agreement that you sign with a buyer is going to say, seller has made all disclosures of everything that they know. Seller has disclosed. So if you don't, you're signing two agreements, one telling me that you've done it, and two with the buyer saying you've disclosed it to them. I want to use this form to help us get there. You'll consult with any of the proper professionals. Compensation. My compensation I will be compensated as below. If I bring you someone who is ready, willing, and able to purchase the property or purchase any interest in the property on the terms listed below, you will pay us as follows. Here are the terms. Please check a box. Plus the $325 listing side commission. This is why we don't need to add the $325 to the purchase contract because it's in our listing contract. We don't need to add the $325 when we represent the seller in a purchase contract. We have to when we represent a buyer because there is no other agreement between us and a buyer that says that we disclose to them $325 transaction fee. But for a seller, our listing agreement covers it. We don't need to put it in when we represent a seller. And then the buyer's agent commission. These two get complicated for some people. Very, very simple, but they get complicated. This is a standard Florida Association of Realtors listing agreement that is an exclusive right to sell listing agreement, exclusive right of sale. This just says your only obligation is to sell the property. You're not required to lease it. You're not required to accept certain offers. This just says that this is how I would be compensated if you do. Why? Well, I'm not going to lease it. Okay, let's talk about that. I know you want to strike it out because you're not going to lease it and you don't want to be responsible for that. But let me provide a scenario to you. My marketing is top notch. I am going to market to everybody that is out there, everywhere we can find them. And my marketing is going to be so good that people are going to call us and make offerings to us. What if, let's just say, Sultan of Dubai sees your property online and says, that's the one, I have to have it. Have to have it. But I don't want to buy it. I just want to lease it for the year. I'm going to be over there. I want to lease it for the year and I want to pay him $25,000 a month to lease his property. And I want to lease it for the next 12 months. Would you accept that offer, Mr. Seller? Would you accept $300,000 in 1 year from someone to lease your property? Would you accept that offer? I'd probably kick you in the ass and tell you that you need to accept the offer because it's an amazing offer. But would you accept that offer? Yeah, well, hell yeah, I would accept that offer. This just says how I'd be compensated. That's all. You don't have to accept that offer. This doesn't say you have to take it. This just says if you did, my marketing was so good, I brought you that offer, I'd be paid if it happened. The one before that is the consideration of an option. An option is, I want to lease your property. I want to buy it, but I want to lease it first with the option to buy it. And the option payment is my security to the seller that I'm going to buy it. And if I don't, you get to keep that option payment. So I want to buy your home for $100,000, but I don't want to buy it now. I want to buy it later. I'm going to give you $10,000 today, and I'm going to lease it for the next year. At the end of the year, I will make a decision if I'm going to buy it for the $100,000 or if I'm going to walk away. If property values dropped, I'm going to walk away from my $10,000 if they drop too far. Mr. Seller, keep the $10,000. If the property values went up, I'm going to exercise my option and buy the home because I'm only paying $100,000. It's worth $150,000. The option payment is 50% of the option consideration. That's what our commission would be. So again, this just spells out how we would be paid if the seller agreed to accept an offer, because our marketing is so phenomenal that we will get you all kinds of interest, and we might procure something that you would be interested in. Or let's talk real scenario. It's on the market for 5 months. You need to sell it, but at that point you say, good, I have to get some income. I need to put it up for rent too. Great, let's put it up for rent. Or somebody offered us to rent and they're going to rent it for a reasonable amount for you. This just says, again, how we would be compensated. That's all. Broker's fee is due. So this is, these are scenarios where we would get paid no matter what. So broker fee due in the following circumstances. If any interest in the property is transferred, whether by sale, lease, exchange, governmental action, bankruptcy, or any other means of transfer, regardless of whether it's buyer secured by me, by you, by them, by anybody, it doesn't matter. Our fee is due if the property changes hands. If the seller refuses or fails to sign an offer at the price and terms stated in this agreement and defaults on an executed sales contract, or agrees with a buyer to cancel an executed sales contract. This just says, hey, I brought you a buyer ready, willing, and able, and the buyer's ready, willing, and able. The buyer's got to closing and you decide, I'm not moving. You can't make me. You're right, I can't. But what I can make you do is still pay me the commission. I can't make you move. I can't tell you that you have to move. I can only tell you that you have a legally binding agreement between you and I that says you're going to pay me if this transfers, or if you refuse to sell after we've got you somebody like this. So my compensation is still due. So if you don't want to sell on a $500,000 home, you got to pay me 30 grand. You're probably going to have to pay the buyer something to try to make sure that they don't come after and sue you for whatever damages. But you're going to have to pay me at least that. That's where our fee is still due. Yeah, so that's the main part for that. Second part, then the other one is if within 90 days after the termination date, seller transfers or contracts to transfer the property or any interest in the property to any prospects with whom the seller, broker, or any real estate licensee communicated regarding the property before the termination date. What does that mean? It basically means I bring you a buyer. We have a 6-month listing agreement. This is what would typically happen. We have a 6-month listing agreement. I bring you a buyer. We walk through the property. The buyer loves the property. Buyer disappears on me. Buyer's agent disappears on me. Next thing I know, I say, oh, well, yeah, we're just not going to sell. My seller tells me we're just not going to sell. Okay, sounds good. I understand. Next thing I see, property changes hands. Public record 30 days later. That's interesting. Buyer's name in public record is the buyer that I brought to the property 2 weeks before the listing termination date. Buyer went behind my back, knocked on the seller's door and said, hey, I know you've been on market for about this period of time. I know most listing agreements are about 6 months. Why don't we just wait until that ends and then you sell the property to me. I'll save some money. You save some money. We don't get the greedy agents and brokers involved. Everything will be fine. Seller goes, great idea. Let's do that. Let's make it happen. Make the deal happen, closes. This protection clause says that we are still due a commission. So then we would have to go after the seller for our compensation and our commission, which rightfully so, you did something shady. Now, the only way that that is not due is that termination period during the protection period. If the seller relists the property, anybody that we showed the property to, if they end up buying the home, we're not due compensation because it's relisted with a new brokerage. So we list the property, we bring a couple buyers, other buyers go through, and we know there's a really interested buyer. We know it. I know that this guy is going to put an offer in. He just needs to wait till next week. I talk to the seller. I cannot convince him to extend the listing agreement. He's so fed up, so pissed off, so angry. He's already talked to another agent, whatever the case is, his best friend, his neighbor, whatever. Listing agreement cancels, terminates, and he lists with somebody else. And that same buyer that we just showed that was so interested writes an offer. We're out. Can't do anything about it. We could try to work another deal out in some way before it got listed with somebody else, but that's just a scenario where we would not be paid. We have the right to retain up to 50% of all deposits. So if the seller retains a deposit as damages because a buyer defaults and the seller retains them, we have the right to retain up to 50% of whatever the deposit that has been retained, which is what we say, get larger deposits. Because if you have a $1,000 deposit, that doesn't benefit anybody. We have to offer half to the buyer's agent who is involved in the deal. That leaves $500 on the table for both us and the seller to split. I get $250, they get $250. Doesn't really benefit anybody. So get larger deposits, it makes more sense. We will cooperate with other brokers and we will compensate them. This just lets you know that we will cooperate with everybody. Single agent notice, Mr. Seller, really main thing here, 2, 3, 4, and 5. 2, 3, 4, and 5. Let me just read these off to you, Mr. Seller. Loyalty, confidentiality, obedience, full disclosure. Now tell me, do those 4 things sound like characteristics and qualities that you want in the person that represents you when you sell your home? Because if you hire nearly anybody else in this market, they will not be able to offer you those 4 things. Legally cannot offer them to you. By law, if they do anything of that sort, they are breaking the law by representing you in a fashion that they are not able to. Loyalty, obedience, confidentiality, and full disclosure. You're selling the biggest asset that you've ever owned. I think those are 4 characteristics that you really need your agent to completely embody and serve to you. Consent to transition. Some people I've had a few, not a lot. So, and I've only had probably 2 people kind of object to this and say they want it removed. I only want you to be my agent. So, but what you're doing, you have to understand the consent to transition. As a single agent, I can represent the seller as a fiduciary, but in Florida, dual agency is not allowed. We cannot represent a seller and a buyer as a single agent under the same company. We can't, it's not allowed. So if you do not allow this clause, hold on a second. If you do not allow this clause into the listing agreement, I cannot allow any of my other agents to view your property, because the minute we have to disclose our representation at the onset of any transaction, and the transaction starts when they view the property. So they can't even come and view your property because we would technically could be acting as single agents for both parties. When the buyer comes in and looks at the property, they can't buy it. They'd have to go to another brokerage. You're limiting the amount of buyers, and you're limiting the best pool of buyers that I have, which are the ones that are right at my fingertips already, where I know the agent intimately, who also has the same knowledge that I do, and we'll be able to make sure we get this closed. So the consent to transition to transaction broker basically just says, and this is how I always explain it, you're basically, if one of my agents in one of my offices, because I have over 500 of them, If they want to bring a buyer to the property, we need this in there. And if they end up wanting to write an offer, you are agreeing to consent to transition to a transactional brokerage relationship. And what that will say is that my job at that point as Century 21 Beggins Enterprises is to make sure that all parties play nice in the sandbox. Mr. Seller, you want to sell your home. Mr. Buyer, you want to buy the home. Everybody's going to deal honestly and fairly, use skill, care, and diligence, disclose all known facts. So you can see how this would be beneficial for you when we have the intimate knowledge with the other agent within the same brokerage to make sure that we get the buyer and the seller exactly what they want. You want to sell, they want to buy. And I want you guys at the end of the transaction to stand up and shake hands and say, man, I'm so glad that it was Century 21 Beggins that was involved in that transaction. It was smooth, it was seamless. So that's how I explain that to them. I'll get back to that in a second. Conditional termination. Look, if you want to cancel your listing agreement, let me know. There's a $2,000 fee. Before the termination date comes up, if you want to cancel it, there's a $2,000 fee. But guess what? I want to cancel it. Wipe it out. Cut it out. I don't want the, I'm not paying you a fee. How about this, Mr. Buyer? How about this? My brokerage has been a broker for over 30 years. He's been in the real estate business. We've been a Century 21 for over 30 years. He's been in the real estate business for way longer than that. We haven't built the reputation that we've built as a Century 21 for 33 years by making people pay us money when shit happens and they can't sell their house. If something happens to you and you can't sell, God forbid you get sick, God forbid you lose a job, God forbid anything crazy like that, something happens and you're just a crazy life experience and you say, God, we can't sell now. Come to me and talk to me. I'm not charging you $2,000. We can negotiate and work out some of the fees that I've already expensed. I've already had to pay for photos. I've already had to pay for some other marketing materials. We can talk about that. But, you know, we're not in the business for this long by making people pay $2,000 when somebody got cancer and now they can't sell, or you lose a job and you're losing all of your income. I'm not going to make you pay $2,000. So just communicate with me. That's the important part here. Communicate with me. We're not in the business of fighting people and screwing people over. We're in the business of doing the right thing. But if you fight me and screw me over, you're paying the $2,000. Simple as that. Dispute resolution says how the disputes would go. You know, the agreement will be construed under Florida law, and all controversies, claims, and other matters in question between the parties arising out of or relating to this agreement or breach thereof will be settled by first attempting mediation under the rules of the American Mediation Association. So we go to mediation first, and if that doesn't work, then we go to arbitration. And it says here, all parties, you will be entitled to recover some reasonable attorney's fees, but then for arbitration, you'll equally split the arbitrator's fees. That is the basic agreement. I only got 6 minutes left. Wow, that took a little longer than I thought. So the other thing for conditional termination, if you have somebody, sometimes we have issues. So let's talk about some of the objections real quick. Sometimes we have issues with objections. Timeline. I don't want to do a 6-month listing. Okay. The first line that I put in here is how I handle, I don't want to do a 6-month listing. First, I try to give them, 6 months. Here's why. It's taking properties in your neighborhood this long to sell. So if we don't have at least this long, we're not going to be able to sell it. And you want to price it this much higher. So homes priced at market price, selling market time. Looks like the market price is X and market time is Y. And you want to list it way higher than that. And you want me to take the market time way lower than that. It doesn't make sense. So let me do this for you. How about we agree that if the property is not under contract within the first 90 days of active marketing in the MLS, we're going to do a 6-month listing. We're doing the 6-month listing. This is why, and I'll prove to you why I'm worth it during that time frame. But if the property is not under contract within the first 90 days of active marketing in the MLS, the seller reserves the right to cancel this contract without any fee or penalty by delivering written notice to the brokerage. That's it. You just have to deliver me written notice. On day 91 of it being live in MLS, you can tell me that you don't want to sell it anymore. Because look, I get it. We want a 6-month listing and market time in that neighborhood is 30 days. If you can't sell my home in 30 days, I'm not hiring you. You're no good. Okay, well, there's other factors. You need to be priced at market price to sell in market time. You're not going to be priced at market price. So why don't I do that? Why don't we agree to do a 6-month listing, but I'll give you 90 days to cancel because you're wanting that price to be so high. You need to give me a little more time to sell it. And we're going to add some predetermined listing price reductions into the additional terms. If the property is not under contract within 30 days, 15 days, 21 days, 10 days, it doesn't matter, of active marketing on MLS, the listing price shall be reduced to, pick a number. And then the next one, say if it's not under contract within 30 days, this is a number. And if it's not under contract within 45, 50 days, this is the number. We're trying to strategically get it down to the market price that it should be to ensure that it sells during that time. If he agrees to that, I'm good. If he doesn't, he's not going to be realistic about selling. He just wants to pie in the sky and hopeful, and he's going to waste your time. So let's try to create some mutually beneficial arrangements that you get what you want by selling it, and I get what I need, which is to make sure that I sell your property and I get the right price, the right terms, and a willing and motivated seller. I don't want a seller who's not motivated. Oh, here's another thing that I'll do sometimes. So I don't like to do discounts. I just don't like the word discount. So I'm not a discount agent. I'm not a discount brokerage. We are not a discount brokerage. I don't do discounts. I'm not giving you a discount. Won't do it. No discount for you. Sorry. But what I will do is, so when you sell this home, you don't plan on being homeless, right? No, we're going to buy a home. Remember we were talking about this? Yeah, exactly. That's my point. You're going to buy a home over in this area, correct? Yeah, over there. And you haven't picked that out and you haven't decided on a builder, and we've looked at a few of those. Yeah, that's right. So if you allow me to represent you in the purchase of your next home, I'm not discounting the listing. I can't discount the listing. This is where I spend my money. This is where I spend my time. This is where all of my marketing goes in. This is my expertise. This is what I get paid to do. I don't discount the listing, but I will give you a credit on the purchase. I'll give you a 1% credit, 0.5% credit, flat dollar amount credit when you purchase a home with me. So I went from a 6% listing that he wanted to do for, say, 4% or 5%. My first instinct is not just to go 5%. If he wants 5%, I don't say, yes, we'll do 5. I say, how about this? I'm going to keep it at 6, but if you do this, I'm not going to give you a 1% on the listing. Let me give you a 1% on the purchase when you use me to buy. So I went from getting a 5% commission, 2.5% to me, 2.5% to a buyer's agent, and nothing after that, to getting a possible, let's say it's a 5% commission on a purchase. So I get 2.5%. Now I get 1.5% from that because I'm going to give him a 1% credit. And I got a 3% listing side. So I got 4.5%. I would have only had 2.5 if I went straight to 5, but I locked in the purchase, gave him a credit on the purchase, and ended up with a 4.5% total commission rather than a 2.5%. So I'm always looking to try to structure a credit to the buyer rather than a discount. Another thing we talk about is, instead of going straight to that number, stand up for your value. Give them all the reasons why you're not doing a discount. But if you do go to 5%, I know it's a lot of the co-brokes are customary right now, 2.5%, but we want to hold our value and standard. So hold your standard. But if you do go to 5, I structure it as not just agreeing to do 5. All right, I'll do 5. It's, all right, Mr. Sell, I really like you. I really, really do. I really enjoyed this. I've really enjoyed this process. I think we work really well together. So here's what I'd be willing to do. I'm willing to go to 5 because I don't want you to end up listing with anybody else, because I know that they're not going to do as good a job as I am. So I'm willing to sacrifice my 1% commission to make sure that you get the best service. I'm doing this for you because I want to make sure you get the best service. Structure it some way like that. I want to let you know that anybody else listing this property is a disservice to you. And I'll agree to do it for that because I don't want you to have to lose. And you will save a little bit of face, but make sure that you go through. And plus, remember, I drove a hard bargain. I'm a negotiator. I'm always going to stand up for my value, and I'll stand up for yours the same way. And I just want you to remember that when the buyers start coming in, I'm going to stand up for your value the exact same way. And that's why I don't want you to get railroaded by somebody that does it for a less commission, who's not going to represent you the same. I'll do it for this, and I'll make sure that you get the best service. That sounds fair, doesn't it? So those are the things I would like to talk about. Real quick, a couple chats in here. Have you ever experienced a buyer been able to go under contract without putting any money in escrow to take the house off the market? You can, it's just not recommended. If a person has 100% financing, realistically, would a broker agent take an asset off the market with understanding that there is a down payment money on seller credits? There should be something. You need an offer of consideration. So they're going to get it back. If they have not a dollar to their name, I don't want to pull my asset off the market. Because if they don't have a dollar to their name, what happens if something pops up and like they have a life experience and now not related to the loan, they just can't afford to buy it anymore because their car broke down or something else happened and they have no money. So it just shows me a little bit of good faith. I want something. I want at least $1,000 in escrow if they are getting everything covered, but they're getting it back at closing. So it doesn't really matter. Does the same apply for someone who's been approved for 97? Is the buyer still required to have out-of-pocket obligation, even if there are credits for? Yes, the buyer, 97% loan to value means they need 3% down. You cannot get your down payment covered as a credit unless it's a first-time buyer type program where it's a grant or it's some type of service like that. The seller cannot credit you your down payment amount. I do 5% if I bring the buyer to the listing, plus I do a buyer credit, always works well. Escrow for closing costs. Yes. All right, guys, it is 9:32. Sorry, I went over a couple minutes there. Have an awesome day. Happy Wednesday, July 12th.